Coming up, Canadian journalist Hadani Ditmars goes deep inside Iraq.
The fruits of the American invasion have resulted in this kind of theocracy.
What do you think of the Americans being here in the old palace?
When I entered this palace for the first time in my life, when the American came.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not supposed to enter any place in here.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's kind of sarcastic. When the American came,
yeah.
I got in.
Every time I went to Iraq, I would be able to gauge how things were going politically, socially, economically by checking in with these friends of mine. The cellist in the Baghdad Philharmonic, Kareem, who's in the book. Ahlam, the single mother hairdresser with the 2 kids who was raising them in sanctions-plagued Baghdad.
We came as liberators. We had experience being liberators.
Being a woman in Iraq, I mean, I'm just a journalist, you know, first and foremost, but because of the gender differences in Iraqi society, there was certainly a difference in perception, and because I have some Middle Eastern ancestry and I was able to pass physically often as an Iraqi, that worked to my disadvantage, actually. I was really like the girl next door or someone's wife or girlfriend or sister, so I didn't get that much respect from the men that ran the Ministry of Information. I had to really earn it. Of course, being a woman was an advantage in terms of being able to speak with women and photograph women and film women and hear their stories. I met 3 sisters. They opened up and they talked to me and they let me film them, and I interviewed their mother, who was only 55 or something, but looked ancient and really had been through a lot. And I asked her, I said, you know, are things better now for Iraqi women? And she said, no, they've gotten worse. And she was married at age 8 and had, you know, something like 18 children, and only half of them survived. And she said, no, but things were better in my day, because look at my daughters, look what they've been through. One of them has this husband who went mad after the war and is beating her and all that, you know. So she really spoke to how, you know, essentially 2 decades of war and sanctions have impacted on Iraqi men and women, but of course with a very negative impact on women's status. And we are talking about a country that, you know, where up until the 80s, 40% of doctors were women, half the civil service were women. Women had a role in public life. They had very liberal family law and divorce law, unlike now with the Sharia law enshrined in the new constitution. I knew things were really getting bad when I heard from a young musician friend recently that live music has been more or less banned in Baghdad because basically the fruits of the American invasion have resulted in this kind of theocracy. But to hear that there was no more music being played in the cradle of civilization really struck me, because there had been such a lively, vital culture. We were led on this PR tour of Abu Ghraib prison in 2003 in September by Janice Karpinski, who was later dismissed. She was the head of prisons in Iraq. And this was 8 months before the scandal broke, but it was rife with irony at the time, but you can imagine in hindsight, you know, reading this chapter about this PR tour. At the time, the Americans were trying to mine it for PR gold, saying, you know, we are kinder, gentler, more humane jailers, and look at our new dental facility. But of course, they wouldn't let us speak to any prisoners, and they took us on this Kafka meets Disneyland tour of the old death chamber, and, you know, lowered the hanging platform and talked about what happened to people and how they were tortured, and executed.
In the cases where the hanging was not complete, unfortunately below, they were cut from the rope and then they were taken into the gas chamber.
Meanwhile, the creepy Baathist doctor who used to issue death certificates under the old regime had been rehired by the Americans. So you kind of wondered, you know, how much had really changed.